National Commissioner of the South African Police Service, General Fannie Masemola, has warned would-be criminals that attacks on police officials will not be tolerated. This after an attack on a member of the National Intervention Unit at a base of the unit in Mthatha in the Eastern Cape. Now, members of the base are investigating allegations of extortion in the area. Masemola has also deplored the underreporting of extortion cases in the Eastern Cape. Extortion incidents have reportedly spiraled out of control in Mthatha, with businesses and schools regularly targeted by criminals demanding protection fees. Last week, traditional leader Dalinzolo Mareke, who was implicated in alleged extortion cases, was killed during a shootout with police. To help us understand this extortion crisis, we are joined by the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Police, Ian Cameron, and the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crimes senior analyst, Jenny Irish Kobashiani. It is so good to have both of you. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Thanks.
So, Ian, let me begin with you, because I see that even in the introduction, we were focusing a lot on the Eastern Cape. But what I'm gathering is, as bad as the situation is in the Eastern Cape, this is a nationwide problem. In fact, this is gripping South Africa at the moment. Extortion has become one of the biggest contributing factors that are entrenched in the nature of South Africa. What is going on?
Well, first of all, I think it's important that obviously Jenny will speak from a research point of view, but just from what we're experiencing at the moment regarding complaints is first of all, it's not a new problem. It's a problem that has been nurtured and actually perfected in many areas to the point where it has become a very lucrative business model for many people. It is an easy way of getting cash, and there are relatively low chances of any form of consequence to anyone who would attempt to commit such a crime. And it's really come to a point where I spoke to someone last week that in parts of Langa, for example, in the Western Cape, where even if you've got a DSTV satellite outside of your house, you pay 190 Rand a week, and if you don't, they shoot you. If you've got anything that let's say, for example, you're parking your car outside your house, then you pay X amount of rands, otherwise they shoot you. And it's just built up to the point where you're actually paying a whole lot of additional taxes to these so-called protection rackets. And obviously they come in all different shapes and sizes. And what's happening now in Mthatha is very clear that they don't want any form of consequence and that they are going to try and push back. I'm, to be honest, though, quite concerned that we simply see it as a uniform member issue, and that we're not focusing on it as a very specialized investigative crime intelligence type of approach. I'm not hearing enough of an integrated form or approach from, for example, the police and the MPA together. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I'm not completely convinced at the moment that the current approach is the correct one.
Yes, certainly. Ian, I'm going to come back to you to ask you what you think needs to be done. But Jenny, let me bring you in from, the very analytical point of view. How bad is it? I mean, talk to us about what is actually going on. I mean, whenever we speak about extortion, it used to be that we spoke a lot about, particularly within the construction mafia and big businesses and all of those things, which is terrible. But now hearing, you're paying for parking spaces outside your house now. This is getting out of hand. Talk to us, Jenny.
We are seeing it increasingly affect a broader spectrum of people and businesses. And what we're seeing in the local township extortion economy is it's got really it's gone beyond just affecting businesses, which is what normally you see in extortion, in systemic kind of extortion. And we're seeing that if you get a new car, you pay an extortionist because you've seen to a tax for buying a new car. So I think that particularly in the local township economy, we're seeing that it is affecting more and more individual community members and not just businesses.
Explain to me who these people are, because in my mind, I'm actually struggling to understand who's going to come to my door and say, you need to pay me a cost for a new car that you've just bought. Who are these people?
So I think one of the things we need to recognize is that extortion, the kind of extortion that we're seeing at the moment, yes, you will have systemic extortion where, for example, an older kid at a school extorts a younger kid and says, give me your lunch or give me money, etc. And that is more kind of opportunistic. But the kind of organized extortion that we're seeing taking place in the townships is being carried out by organized crime elements. And in particular, you see gangs. So, for example, if you look at places like Khayelitsha, if you look at places like Alex, if you look at places like Tebisa, etc., what we are seeing is that it is criminal gangs, many of whom are now making almost as much money from extortion as they would have from the drug trade, that are involved in this kind of extortion.
Yeah, and this is the problem. And I think, Ian, I go back to what you said a little bit earlier, is that it's doing so well because there's no repercussions and they're getting away with this. I mean, this really, again, is highlighting this pervasive lawlessness and I suppose that's just become the norm in our communities. Perhaps you want to address that as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, just last week in the Police Portfolio Committee, in my opening remarks, I actually spoke about the VIP 8. You remember the 8 VIP protection guys that were meant to protect the deputy president last year that assaulted those civilians next to the N1.
Yeah.
And I use that as a specific example that we're actually being extorted by our own law enforcement officials. By a lacking disciplinary process, we are now being held hostage by criminal police officers. And there's a specific reason why I mention that. If we can't fix those little things and clear up our own house properly, then we can't expect to fix the problem on the outside. And, what's happening now is that in many areas, I work in the Cape Flats very often, we're now seeing cops, the dirty ones, actually starting to get quite nervous because there is a form of pushback. I don't think it's enough yet, but there is some pushback, and it's almost as though they want to make sure that the consequences continue to stay as limited or non-existing as possible. And again, I come back to that specific area. Recently, we had a police officer that was involved not only in extortion, but also dealing drugs for a very prominent gang. And once he was sacked, unfortunately the provincial officer overruled the sacking and just transferred him to another part of the province. So again, I keep on coming back to corruption and discipline issues inside SABC. That's issue number one. Issue number two is an integrated strategy with regards to investigative capacity, crime intelligence, and the MPA, because at the moment it's almost as though we're not on the same track.
Yeah, and that's a great worry. And I just want to ask you, Jenny, one of the issues that I think has become quite alarming now and quite shocking is this infiltration into the education sector as well. I mean, I'm reading stories of these so-called gangs that you're referring to walking into schools and demanding money from teachers and from principals. Talk to me about this now. What's going on with the education system, and worries that we're approaching matric exams now and this could jeopardize this?
I think we've lost Jenny. I can't
Okay,
see her anymore.
Ian, would you like to take that? Because I mean, I know you're on top of this too.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And this is an issue that's not only happening with regards to protection rackets from the outside keeping schools hostage, but that we're actually having kids that are already involved in these gang or organized crime groupings that now extort kids on the inside and extort teachers, extort the education department, even to a larger scale. I mean, there are many examples in the Department of Health where it's happened before. This morning, I read another report about a young engineer, that actually blew the whistle on corruption with regards to Transnet, about inflated pricing, that was also murdered. So the reason why I keep on mentioning all the other elements, Leanne, is that we need to understand that this is very much intertwined and linked with so many other parts of organized crime. This has just become a very easy cash cow for these criminals to build their networks out.
Yeah, and that's I was reading that exact same story this morning. My worry is law enforcement agencies conspiring with these criminal elements. I mean, this is one of the greatest worries that we have, because how do we now deal with this challenge? I mean, corruption within the police service that really has diminished public trust in government institutions. When something like this happens to you, who do you turn to? Because your first port of call would be to go and report it to the police, but when the police are involved, where do you go?
Well, I think this is the question. I mean, I understand completely what the National Commissioner says, that he says, more people need to report extortion, but why? We need to ask why people aren't reporting it. It's because often when they do report it, it either leaks out and they end up getting killed because the cops they reported to are dirty, or nothing gets done about it. And with that, again, as I always emphasize, I'm not saying all cops are bad or anything like that. I mean, I sympathize with the good ones, and I know that the majority of them do have good intentions. But unfortunately, we have got this issue where we haven't cleaned up house to a point where we can honestly say people can go and report risk-free. And this is the same with the MPA. We can honestly, I mean, I know of many legal professionals that wouldn't want to work for the MPA because it is such a horrific space to work in. There's just too many risks to take, and you don't know who you can trust. And before we don't fix that, I'm sorry I'm sounding very depressing this morning, but if we don't clean up house in that way where we can honestly say we can trust the people who we report to, then it's going to be very difficult, especially in poorer communities, to get them to really report the crimes that are occurring there. They are just simply too scared.
Yeah, indeed. And it's a great worry. Jenny, I believe that we've got you back. So I think we just lost you a bit of the connection there. Jenny, we saw this past week the National Assembly convening, discussing the threat posed by those committing acts of extortion in South Africa. And the question asked is this giving an image of a government that is taking this issue seriously? Is this enough? Do you have faith in the National Commissioner, General Fannie Masemola? Do you think he's pushing the right buttons, doing the right things?
Look, I do think that the National Assembly having a debate on this issue is an incredibly important step. As Ian said at the beginning, this has been going on for some time, and we've seen it escalate and escalate and escalate. And I think that, but when it comes to, we need to make sure that that is translated into action on the ground. And that what we are seeing is an effective strategy arising as a result of what we're seeing, of how seriously it is being taken by the lawmakers in the country. And I don't always see that translating into a very effective strategy. So, for example, saying we're going to put more boots on the ground, yes, but what are we going to be doing with those people? Are we looking at saying this is an area where we're not seeing reporting happening? How do we put in place a mechanism where people have faith in a reporting mechanism? If we're putting boots on the ground, what are they actually doing? Are we able to say, okay, so we're not necessarily getting reports, but we know that in this area, people collect every Friday from the extortionists. Are we then able to set up, for example, sting operations and catch the extortionists? So I think that while I really applaud the fact that the lawmakers and that the Minister of Police are really seem to be really serious about taking this issue forward, I think we need to look at what strategies we need to actually to back up that.
Yeah, I mean, Ian, it's great news, and it's wonderful to see government taking the crime of extortion seriously. But both of you have said this now, the fact that it's taken so long and the fact that it's now actually out of control, because it is out of control. The moment you have people going into schools asking for bribes, people going and asking somebody who's bought a new car for a bribe, somebody asking someone who wants to park outside their house for a bribe. I mean, this is insane, the stories that we're hearing. Ian, do you think that the state's overall crime intelligence and monitoring and response systems need a complete overhaul?
So I'm going to start with an example. Mfuleni in the Cape Flats, they even collect on the back of bakkies. So armed men sit on the back of bakkies and then they drive around and they collect their money. And this is really what the reality has become. And to answer you very honestly, it needs a complete overhaul. In my opinion, crime intelligence for all, for most of it, it's collapsed completely. and that needs to be completely rebuilt for years. And the new minister has acknowledged this. He said it last week in Parliament. He knows that crime intelligence for a very long time was often abused for political use, and that it wasn't used for the actual reasons that it's meant to have been used for. So very worried about that. And then the shortage of specialized detectives. The specific case that I told you that we spoke about this morning about the young engineer in Vereniging that blew the whistle, those detectives that are investigating that are being followed home, they're getting death threats, and the list goes on. And a month later, after they reported this and asked for protection detail, they still don't have it. So this goes to show, how much still needs to be done. I do want to say, on a positive sense, it's the first time in years that I've seen a police minister and even the two deputy ministers speaking so openly and acknowledging the challenge, and also being transparent about the shortcomings of the South African police service. For many years, we've just constantly heard how good everything is and that it's actually okay, and it's just the public blowing it out of proportion. They're actually acknowledging it. So I think that's a step in the right direction. It's now a matter of making sure that SABC management and the broader law enforcement space is held to account, and actually making sure that they get the job done.
Yeah. Jenny, let me just get a final word from you on here. I mean, is there a reason to believe that some perpetrators of extortion are politically connected?
Look, I do think that we have seen in places, for example, if one takes the construction mafia, we did see that there were certain connections that mafia had, particularly in KwaZulu-Natal, and relations with people. And that makes it quite difficult. We also know for a fact, again, using the construction mafia as an example, and I know that you see the same kind of thing with Boko Haram in Pretoria, in Shashanguve, and Mamelodi. They have made a concerted effort to try and infiltrate local government. And then you start seeing there that it makes it more difficult to deal with. Not only do they access information, but they also have their people situated in local government at different levels.
Yeah. Thanks, Jenny. Ian, your final word. Is there a plan? Because we're talking about all of this, it's awful. I mean, people have got cases sitting at police stations where even the police tell you, please will you hire a private investigator, because we don't have enough capacity to deal with this. So it's a murder, it's a robbery, it's a hijacking, it's anything, and they tell you to go and hire another agency to work on this. Is there a plan? I mean, that can help South Africans with not only this extortion, but our spiraling crime rates?
Yeah, so yes, I think there are strategies. There are several strategies. Unfortunately, in my opinion, not being implemented at the moment the way they should. National Intervention Unit is a temporary approach. It's something that is basically like sticking a plaster on a wound that needs surgery. So it might stabilize for a small while in an area, but without proper investigation and prosecution, we can't expect it to change. So it's far more deep-rooted than just sending uniform members in to kind of combat an area for a while. Strategies do exist. Whether they're being implemented is another question. From our point of view, we're obviously doing oversight, and we have started following up on specific cases. And I think next week there's actually a police committee session that's dedicated to feedback regarding what is actually being done. And I expect decent scrutiny during that session.
All right, Ian, thank you. Jenny, thank you very, very much. That, of course, Jenny Irish Koboshiani, the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime Senior Analyst, and Ian Cameron, the Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, speaking about extortion crisis here in South Africa and these rampant cases that are just running into every sector that's affecting South Africans wherever you go. All right, let's leave it there.